Yo, what's up? I'm back with another video. Today we're doing alternate future of the world. So I've already got some of the alliances in here, like NATO, CSTO, Axis of Resistance, Gulf Shield Cooperation Council, whatever you want to call it, and the Rio Pact, and then the one over here in Asia. But let's get started. And we gotta get started with what's actually going on right now, Ukraine. And I'm just gonna do what I normally do for Ukraine. Luhansk and Donbass, I think that's how you pronounce it, they get some autonomy. And then Crimea over here, most of it goes to Russia, but you have this little exclave down here that Ukraine keeps because most of the people living down here aren't even Russian in that part of Crimea. And so that's why I have Ukraine keep that when I do these scenarios. But that's probably what would most likely happen anyway, if anything does come out of this. So we're just gonna have that being what happens. And then I'm not gonna touch on Israel. But I will touch on the civil war going on in Myanmar. So there's a lot of different sides to this. So I'm gonna be giving some countries colors so that we can kind of represent these sides, because some countries have their militaries in these other countries in Myanmar. I'm trying to say, oh my god. These include China, India, Thailand, and Bangladesh, who all occupy parts of Myanmar currently. So, but then there's also like these two major groups in Myanmar, so I'll be coloring those in. So this is about what the Bangladeshi army has done. In the Thai, they have a lot of people in Myanmar. A lot of their military's there. And they're occupying like all that, along with the entire like tail of Myanmar, as I like to call it. So we'll show their front line something like this. And yeah, so there's also, let me show you some of the other groups, just give me a sec, if I can get this all ready. But some of the other groups, I think it's this like one militia group type thing. That looks good enough. I'm not gonna spend my time coloring all of it in. Let me also just get a bigger brush size in here. China, they have troops over here. In India, bet you can guess where they have their troops. About there, yeah. And then this is gonna be rebel group number 1 and rebel group number 2. So you can see a lot of groups in Myanmar. And I'm gonna have NATO actually decide to jump in on this. So they're gonna start their peacekeeping forces totally into Myanmar down here in the south. They're gonna meet up with the Thai forces over here. Meanwhile, the Bangladeshi forces are just gonna chill. They're gonna let Indian forces come down here and take some of that. Meanwhile, the Chinese are trying to meet up with the Indians over here so that they can cut off this group. But this group's going to continue to invade the main government of Myanmar. And so, yeah. And then this militia group, NATO's going to find their way up here because they've made some landings. And they're going to take down this militia group. Meanwhile, the Thai forces are going to move into more of the country, too. The Chinese forces are kind of cut off. Now, and so, these guys are all going to meet. The Bangladeshis, this rebel group, NATO, Thailand, China, and India. They're all going to meet up. And they're going to decide to split up the country. And so we're going to start with Bangladesh here because they actually, I'm pretty sure, have some claims in Myanmar. So we're going to be giving them their claims, which is going to be something like that. And so let's erase this border, make the new border. And the reason I'm focusing in on Myanmar is I don't see a lot of mapping mapping YouTubers who do this. And the Thai forces, they're gonna have like a Thai Myanmar. There's gonna be one of the like main groups in Myanmar. And they're also gonna grab some land out of this, you know. They're gonna try and unite this area. And so I'll show the Chinese next, and the Indians. Probably the Indians before the Chinese. No, the Chinese before the Indians, because the Chinese have more. Something like there. And the Chinese and Indians. The Indians, we're just gonna draw these together, and then I'll draw a line to separate the two. So this probably is what. And then you see them go up north here to divide it. And so these different countries are kind of gonna be controlled by this, and then this part of Myanmar, they're gonna be like controlled by NATO, pretty much. So NATO, you already know, they're becoming the WDO or whatever, World Defense Organization. So could have there. And that's that other rebel group that I was telling y'all about. And so we're gonna have NATO go ahead and grab this part of Myanmar. And I could probably see the Chinese and Indian Myanmar's uniting along with the Thai uniting with the NATO. But we're not gonna have that happen just quite yet. So let's go and focus on another civil war. The one in, you guessed it, Syria. And so we're gonna have Kurdistan getting its independence over here. They're gonna, in Syria, are gonna agree to some stuff. And together they're gonna work to take out the rebels if Kurdistan is given its independence. And so they're gonna have Kurdistan. Along with the Kurds in Iraq are very, what do you call them, autonomous. And so eventually they're just going to try and get their independence, which they're going to go ahead and do now that they have actual kind of independence in Syria. You already know they have their claims in Iran and Turkey, but they're not going to be able to get that yet. They're just going to, just to create it as a country, you think they're getting their claims in big boy strong countries? No way. You thought wrong. But now let's get into some more wars soon. Not yet. First we have to settle Yemen. In Yemen, these civil wars are getting really boring. I mean, how long? It's been decades now. And so we're gonna have Yemen split up kind of colonial ways. So we got this Yemen, and this Yemen's this is like the main Yemenis government. And they're very weak, so they're gonna join the Gulf Shield Cooperation Council Force, whatever. And let's get started on some wars. So we're gonna be sticking kind of in the Middle East, moving up north a bit though, to the Caucasus region. And it's gonna be Armenia and Azerbaijan. So you already know Armenia and Azerbaijan, they're not really good with each other. You're not chill. So we're gonna have some shots being fired at the border over here. Probably this more western side. That's not even west, that's east. The eastern side is where the shots are gonna be fired. And it's gonna start a war. You don't really know who's starting the war though. So the only reason I'm saying that is just so that we don't get all of NATO involved. Because it's gonna be Turkey, Georgia, and Azerbaijan versus Russia and Armenia. So first things first, Azerbaijani troops are going to enter into Armenia. And they're going to move and they're going to unite with their exclave. And so the Armenians are getting scared. Also because Turkish troops start to enter into the country. And so creating a front line that looks something like this. Meanwhile, the Russians have, what is it? Abkhazia in the south, Odessa. I don't know. But you already know they have that. Eventually the Russians are going to start entering into Georgia. And this is what the front line is going to look like. But then Turkish troops are going to continue their invasion of Armenia and capture some more. Meanwhile, the Azerbaijanis are going to fund a revolt, and I think it's called Chechnya. Don't quote me on that. So it's Chechnya. Going to have this, and they're going to occupy it. And so, along with some Azerbaijani troops are going to invade into Russia. I know I might be overestimating the blue team here, but yeah. Russians are going to continue to push down into Georgia. Georgia is not like super strong. It's not like they're really weak, but the only reason you say they're not weak is because they have strong allies. And so, yeah. Meanwhile, Turkish troops are going to continue the push in Armenia. Armenia is going to start to capitulate. Russian troops are going to try and spearhead to save Armenia. And so they're going to get something like that there as they're trying to defend the country. Meanwhile, now that their military is focused over here in Georgia and Armenia, they're not as focused over here in Chechnya, in the southern part of the country. So the Azerbaijanis are going to be able to move, along with the Chechnyans, I think, is what you would call them. They're going to try and start to reliberate some parts of Georgia. Not going to go too successful, though. Meanwhile, the Russians, they're going to capitulate, what is this? Capitulate, western Georgia. Meanwhile, Turkish troops are now pulling out of Armenia to go fight in Georgia. Azerbaijani troops are pulling out of Russia to go fight in Armenia. So, the Armenian front here is basically going to fall to the blue team. Meanwhile, this Georgian front is going to be moved a bit. And eventually, I could see these two teams kind of suing for peace. So let's take a look at what a peace treaty would look like. So, first things first, we have Azerbaijan down south here, connecting up to their exclave, taking kind of the panhandle of Armenia. Looking something like meh. That looks about right. Along with, what is this? The South Odessa and Abkhazia going over to Russia. Along with they're just gonna get a little bit of this part of the country too, because they occupied it for like the entire war. So the only reason Georgia is not being completely destroyed and basically going all over to Russia is because the Azerbaijanis aren't going to get any bit of Russia. Kind of made a deal. So over here, the Chechens, or whatever, Republic of Chechnya, they're going to get their independence from Russia. And these three countries here, Azerbaijan, Georgia, and the now Chechnya country, probably all, I mean, Georgia and Azerbaijan are already NATO partners, I think. So, Chechnya would probably apply for NATO partnership. But then, what do we have happening next? That's a good question. And it's going to be one war, and that's going to be the end of this episode. And what is this war, you might ask? This war is the Nile Dam. Damn, says Egypt. I know, I'm so funny. But Sudan is also kind of experiencing a civil war currently. So, yeah. We're gonna have South Sudan and Ethiopia against Egypt, Sudan, and Eritrea, along with some, revolts in these countries. Like, there's a terrorist group in, like, Sudan here. Meanwhile, there's a place that wants independence from Ethiopia, Tigray, I think is what it's called, here. So, let me just get these filled in, and then we'll begin the war. And so, this war, I always overestimate the red team's capabilities, if I'm being honest, in these wars. But, yeah. In this part of Sudan, in the west here, that I didn't color in, the only reason I didn't color it in is just because it takes too much time, But I'm already taking way too much time. The video's probably gonna be 7 hours long. I'm joking. But really I need suggestions for what should happen. It can be, like, fictional as fuck. Don't really care. We're gonna start with the South Sudanese and some Ethiopians making a push up here into Sudan, along with the Ethiopians capturing the panhandle of Eritrea. Meanwhile, the Eritreans move down here south with the rebellions. And the rebels, yeah, I said that word right. They're gonna continue to invade into Sudan. Meanwhile, Egyptian forces are gonna start to arrive on the front lines, and they're gonna push into Ethiopia a little, along with pushing the South Sudanese out of here, trying to make a spearhead into the two countries. Meanwhile, the Ethiopians are going to push back the revolts, along with pushing into Eritrea a bit more. Or Eritrea, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. This war is pretty balanced, except that the terrorists in Sudan have, like, a lot of land. But this land is basically just desert. So they're going to continue to push into Sudan, trying to reach the capital. I don't know where the hell the capital is. It's probably on the Nile. That's what I'll give you. Probably on the Nile. Meanwhile, up here, the revolts are gonna push back these guys, with the Egyptians and Sudanese moving a bit more into Ethiopia. And eventually, the two sides They're gonna sue for peace because this war is just a back and forth. So let's take a look at a peace treaty. In the beginning of this peace treaty, we have this province up here that I was talking about in Ethiopia, Tigray, getting its independence. Meanwhile, Eritrea is gonna lose part of its panhandle to Ethiopia. No, Ethiopia is happy about this. Finally, not landlocked anymore. In South Sudan, you know, they have their kind of like area here that I'm pretty sure they lay claim to. Well, I know they lay claim to, and I'm just not sure if it's that area right here. But I know they have something where they claim to it, and so they're gonna get that. Meanwhile, the terrorist organization over here is gonna get their independence from Sudan. So let's draw in some borders here. Hopefully don't look too bad. They probably look really bad, knowing how I am at drawing borders. Yeah, they look pretty bad. But that's really all that's gonna happen. Well, and the Ethiopians are probably gonna stop from building the dam. Along with, I could see Sudan maybe taking a little bit of that from South Sudan, just because they felt like it. Expand that really kind of weird looking panhandle. And one last event. Somaliland getting its independence, so please come up with some ideas. I know this first episode was probably pretty boring, just because I'm trying to solve all the civil wars. That's my first course of action. If I can draw this border right, oh my god. I'm drawing it like way too. I'll give them that. No, that's not what the actual border looks like. There we go, that's better. So independent Somaliland. But any ideas y'all have, please put them in the comments. I really need ideas. I'm not good with coming up with like fictional ideas on my own. That's why I normally use comment sections for stuff like this to find other ideas. And if you just want to see a feature implemented, I can do that too. But I'm probably going to make that the end of today's episode. For episode 1 of Alternative Future of the World. Hope you guys liked it.